I've learned to identify suffering by the sound it makes. 4 years working at Clearview County Shelter taught me that pain has a rhythm. The nervous pacing of anxious dogs, the high-pitched yelping of scared puppies, the constant barking of those still fighting to be seen. But the worst sound? Silence. And that's all I heard coming from Kennel 40. I'm Bunny George, 25 years old, and I make $11.50 an hour scrubbing kennels and pretending my heart doesn't crack every single day. That morning, I walked past 39 kennels full of dogs, doing everything they could to catch someone's attention. Jumping, spinning, play bowing, tail wagging so hard their whole bodies shook. Then I reached Kennel 40. Sheriff wasn't moving. He was hunched in the corner, that massive, blocky head hanging so low his chin nearly touched the concrete. His dusty, blue-gray coat, what was left of it, was patchy and moth-eaten. Raw red skin showed through in angry circles around his eyes, down his legs, across his ribs. The white patch on his chest, the only beautiful thing left on him, was barely visible under the crusty scabs. He looked like he'd been set on fire and left to rot. 70 days he'd been here. 70 days of people covering their children's eyes when they walked past. 70 days of hearing, "What's wrong with it?" And "Is that thing contagious?" And "Oh my God, that's disgusting." Today was day 71, his last day. The euthanasia appointment was scheduled for 5 p.m. I had 8 hours to figure out how to save a dog I couldn't afford, with money I didn't have. But here's the thing. Sheriff had already given up. He'd stopped scratching his raw skin against the chain link, stopped limping to the kennel door when footsteps approached, stopped hoping that today would be different. What happened in those final hours still haunts me. Because sometimes the only way to save something is to refuse to let it surrender, even when surrender seems like mercy. I wasn't supposed to get attached. That's the golden rule when you work at a kill shelter, where space is currency, and every intake means someone else's time is up. You can't love them all, or you'll drown in grief every single week. But Sheriff destroyed that rule the day they dragged him in. It was a Thursday in late September. Animal control brought him in from a foreclosed property. The owners had abandoned him in the backyard when they left. No food, no water, just a chain and a doghouse with a collapsed roof. He'd been out there for weeks, maybe longer. When they carried him through the intake door, I actually gasped. I'd seen mange before, but nothing like this. His skin looked like cracked leather, oozing in places, scabbed over in others. Both eyes were so swollen he could barely see. He'd lost at least 20 pounds. The blue collar around his neck hung loose, jingling with tags from a life that no longer existed. The first thing he did, and I'll never forget this, was lean his crusty, bleeding head against my leg and sigh. Not growl, not snap. He sighed, like he was relieved someone finally gave a damn. That's when I knew he was different. Most dogs come in from neglect, terrified, reactive, shut down completely. Sheriff came in still trusting, like he believed people were good even after they'd left him to die slowly in a backyard full of his own filth. For the first week, I actually thought someone would see past the sickness. He was only 4 years old. Beneath the horror show of his skin, you could see the gentle giant he was. Blocky pit bull build, floppy natural ears that made him look puppy soft, soulful eyes that tracked your every move. The vet said he had Demodectic Mange, complicated by a bacterial infection. Treatable, she said, not contagious to humans, she said. But when people heard mange, they heard leprosy. When they saw his raw red skin, they saw a monster. Days turned into weeks. I started bringing him extra treats from the dollar store, the kind I couldn't really afford, but bought anyway. I'd sit outside his quarantine kennel during my 30-minute lunch break, eating ramen from a styrofoam cup while he rested his scabby head against the chain link, as close to me as the barrier would allow. He never begged for my food. He just wanted to be near someone who didn't flinch when they looked at him. By day 30, I'd watched a parade of rejection that still makes my stomach turn. A woman pulled her daughter away, saying, "Don't look at it, sweetie, it's sick." A man laughed and said, "That's not a dog, that's a science experiment." A couple stood there debating whether he was suffering too much and if euthanasia was the kindest option, as if Sheriff couldn't hear every word. I wanted to scream at all of them. He's not an it. He's not suffering from something that can't be fixed. He's just itchy. He's just been forgotten. By day 50, I saw the light leave his eyes. His tail stopped wagging when I approached. He stopped eating his kibble. The kennel tech started whispering about quality of life, which is code for he's given up, so we should too. By day 69, I was sitting on the floor outside Kennel 40 at 9 p.m., long after my shift ended, crying into my hands because I'd checked my bank account and it said $42.50. Adoption fee was $75. First round of medication, the vet estimated at $120. First month's worth of medicated baths and antibiotics, another $200. I didn't have it. I could barely afford rent. My car was held together with a duct tape and prayer. I was living off instant noodles and gas station coffee. But I made him a promise that night, whispering through the chain link while he stared at nothing. "Tomorrow," I said, my voice cracking. "Tomorrow, I'm not letting them take you. I don't know how, but I'm not letting you die thinking nobody loved you." I didn't believe myself. How could I? I was one missed paycheck away from eviction. But sometimes, belief isn't what saves you. Sometimes, it's just rage. Rage at a system that measures worth in dollars. Rage at a world that throws away anything that isn't perfect. Day 70 arrived with the kind of morning that feels too bright for something so dark. I clocked in at 7 a.m. The code red list was already stapled on the bulletin board in the break room. Sheriff's name was third from the top, with 5 p.m. written in red ink next to it. Euthanasia room, Dr. Patel, pink juice prepped. Subscribe to this channel if you really want to know how Sheriff survives from the sickness, and comment where you're watching from. I will love to say hello to you just to know how far our story is going. I need to rewind a bit. Let me take you back to where this really started, because understanding how I got here, standing in front of that bulletin board staring at Sheriff's name on the kill list, requires you to see the life I was barely holding together. My alarm went off at 5:30 a.m. in a studio apartment that cost $650 a month, which doesn't sound like much until you're making $11.50 an hour and your car needs new brakes you can't afford. I rolled out of a mattress on the floor, no bed frame, that's a luxury, and walked 3 steps to my kitchen, which was really just a hot plate, a mini fridge, and a microwave I'd found on the curb. Breakfast was instant oatmeal, again. I'd been rotating between oatmeal and ramen for 6 weeks straight because my last paycheck went to an emergency root canal that my dental insurance decided wasn't actually an emergency. I walked to work. 42 minutes each way, regardless of weather, because gas was expensive and my check engine light had been on for 3 months. The shelter was only 4 miles away, but when you're wearing secondhand sneakers with holes in the soles, 4 miles feels like forever. I clocked in at 7 a.m. wearing the same navy blue scrub top I'd worn for 3 years. The Clearview County Shelter logo faded to almost nothing across the chest. My job was simple. Clean kennels, feed dogs, walk dogs. Try not to think about which ones wouldn't be here next month. That Thursday in September started like any other. I was hauling a 50-pound bag of kibble from the storage room when I heard the intake door slam. Animal Control Officer Rodriguez came through first, then his partner Martinez, and between them they were half dragging, half carrying something I initially thought was a bag of trash. Then it moved. Then I realized it was a dog. I dropped the kibble. The bag split open and food scattered everywhere, but I didn't care because I couldn't stop staring at what they'd brought in. He was massive, probably 70 pounds, blocky pit bull head, muscular build beneath the wreckage of his body. But his skin, oh God, his skin! Patches of dusty blue-gray fur clung to him in islands, surrounded by raw, exposed flesh, the color of raw meat. His face was the worst. Both eyes were swollen, nearly shut, crusty yellow discharge caking his lashes. Scabs covered his muzzle, his ears, down his neck. Where there should have been a beautiful coat, there were bleeding sores and thick gray crusts that looked like tree bark. The white patch on his chest, the only marking visible beneath the horror, was ringed with oozing red welts. "For closure pickup," Rodriguez said, setting the dog down. The animal swayed on his feet, ribs showing through patchy skin, that loose blue collar jingling with tags from owners who'd left him chained in a backyard to rot. Been out there at least a month, maybe more. No food, no water. Owner skipped town. The smell hit me next. Infection. Rot. The sour stench of flesh breaking down. I'd smelled it before on dogs with untreated wounds, but never this strong. The dog lifted his head, barely, like it weighed 100 pounds, and looked at me with eyes I could barely see through the swelling. Then he did something that broke me. He took 2 shaking steps forward and leaned his crusty, bleeding head against my leg. Not aggressive, not scared, just exhausted, just done. And then he sighed, this long, rattling exhale, like he was relieved someone was finally paying attention. "Jesus," I whispered, crouching down. Up close, the damage was worse. The scabs weren't just on the surface. They were thick, layered, like his skin had been peeling and scarring over and over. Where he wasn't scabbed, his flesh was inflamed and weeping. He smelled like infection and neglect and suffering. But when I gently touched the one clean spot on his shoulder, he leaned into it. He wanted comfort even though everything hurt. "What's his name?" I asked. Rodriguez checked the tags. "Sheriff." "Sheriff," I repeated softly. He lifted his head slightly, just enough to acknowledge me. "Okay, Sheriff, we've got you now." Dr. Patel came out of the exam room, took one look at him, and her face went carefully neutral. That's the look vets get when they're calculating how much suffering is too much suffering. She snapped on gloves and knelt beside him, lifting his lips to check his gums, pressing gently on his belly, running her hands over his ravaged skin while he stood there trembling. After 5 minutes, she stood up and stripped off the gloves. "Let's get him into isolation," she said. "Bunny, bring him to exam 3. I walked Sheriff down the hallway, his nails clicking weakly on the linoleum. He didn't pull, didn't resist, just followed me like he'd been following people his whole life, trusting they'd eventually lead him somewhere good. I settled him on the exam table, and Dr. Patel came in with her clipboard, already writing before she'd even started talking. "Severe Demodectic Mange," she said, not looking up. "Complicated by secondary bacterial infection, probably staph. The mites have been reproducing unchecked for months." "Mites?" I said. She finally looked at me. "Demodecs. They're microscopic mites that live on basically every dog in the world. Normally, a healthy immune system keeps them in check. Just a few mites hanging out in hair follicles, no big deal. But when a dog is stressed, malnourished, or genetically predisposed, their immune system crashes and the mites go into overdrive. They reproduce by the thousands, burrowing into hair follicles, causing massive inflammation. The hair falls out, the skin gets infected, and you end up with this." She gestured at Sheriff, who was sitting perfectly still on the table, staring at nothing. "Is it contagious?" I asked, because I'd already touched him and honestly didn't care, but I needed to know what I was dealing with. "Not to you," Dr. Patel said. "Demodectic mange isn't contagious to humans or even to other adult dogs. The mites are species-specific, and they're already on every dog anyway. This isn't something he can spread around the shelter. But people see this," she pointed at his raw, oozing skin, "and they think leprosy. They think of the zombie virus. They think he's rotting from the inside out. I've had families literally scream when they see dogs with mange this bad." But it's treatable, right? Dr. Patel hesitated, and that hesitation told me everything. Yes, she said slowly, it's highly treatable. Modern flea and tick preventatives, Bravecto, NexGard, they kill the mites really effectively when used off-label. We'd do medicated baths with benzoyl peroxide shampoo to flush out the hair follicles, maybe some Mitaban dips if it's really stubborn, antibiotics for the secondary infection. In 3 months, maybe 4, he could be completely healed. Beautiful coat, healthy skin, you'd never know he'd been sick. So we treat him, I said. She looked at me like I'd suggested we teach him to fly. Bunny, the treatment costs money. The shelter doesn't have the budget for a case this severe. And even if we did, who's going to adopt him? Look at him. He looks like a creature from a horror movie. People don't adopt sick dogs. They adopt puppies and labs and dogs that look like they belong in a pet food commercial. So what happens to him? Dr. Patel set down her clipboard and pressed her fingers against her temples. He goes into isolation while we treat the infection enough to make him comfortable. We list him as available, see if anyone bites. But Bunny, realistically, he's going on the code red list in 70 days, maybe sooner if the infection gets worse. I'm sorry, that's just how this works. She stamped his file. I watched the red ink, unadoptable, bleed across the top of his intake sheet. Sheriff sat on that exam table, swaying slightly, eyes half closed, completely unaware that he'd just been sentenced to death. I started spending my lunch breaks in the isolation wing. 30 minutes a day, sitting on the cold concrete floor outside Kennel 40 with a styrofoam cup of ramen and a plastic spoon. Sheriff would be lying in the corner, too exhausted to stand, his breathing labored from the infection raging through his system. But when I sat down, when I started talking to him, he'd lift his head, just a little, just enough to show me he knew I was there. "Hey, big guy," I'd say, slurping noodles I could barely taste. "Rough day?" He'd shift his weight, dragging himself a few inches closer to the chain link that separated us. Then he'd rest his scabby head against the mesh, as close to me as the barrier would allow. I'd press my fingers through the gaps, scratching gently around his ears where the skin wasn't too raw. He'd close his eyes, and for just a moment, the pain would ease from his face. "You're not aggressive," I whispered one day, watching him melt under my touch. "You're just hurting. You're just scared, and nobody sees it but me." He opened one swollen eye and looked at me, and I swear to God, he understood. The parade started around day 20. Families coming through on adoption days, walking the rows of kennels, looking for their perfect dog. I'd watch them approach Kennel 40, watch their expressions shift from curiosity to horror in real time. A little girl pointed at him once and said, "Mommy, what's wrong with that one?" Her mother grabbed her hand and yanked her away. "Don't look, sweetie, it's sick." Another family stood there debating out loud, as if Sheriff couldn't hear them. "Should we tell someone?" the dad said. "I think it's suffering." The mom nodded. "Maybe they should just put it out of its misery." One guy actually laughed, stood there with his girlfriend and laughed, saying, "Is that a dog or a zombie? Jesus, that thing is disgusting." I wanted to scream at all of them. I wanted to drag them into that kennel and make them sit with Sheriff, make them feel how gentle he was, how sweet, how his tail would thump weakly against the floor when you said his name. But I couldn't. All I could do was watch him absorb their rejection, watch the hope drain from his eyes a little more each day. By day 50, he'd stopped coming to the front of the kennel. By day 60, he'd stopped eating. Dr. Patel tried hand-feeding him, tried different foods, but he'd just turn his head away. He was giving up. Slowly, quietly, surrendering to the inevitable. 3 days before day 70, I sat outside his kennel at midnight. I wasn't supposed to be there. The shelter closed at 8 p.m., but I had a key and nobody checked the cameras. I'd brought my savings jar from home, a big pickle jar I'd been filling with tips and spare change for 2 years. I dumped it on the floor and started counting. Ones, fives, quarters, dimes, nickels. I counted twice to be sure. $42.50. Adoption fee, $75. First round of medication, $120. Medicated baths and antibiotics for the first month, another $200. I was $350 short of saving his life. Sheriff was lying in his usual corner, not even watching me anymore. His ribs showed through his patchy skin. His eyes were dull. He'd stopped scratching because he didn't have the energy. I pressed my face against the chain link and let myself cry. Really cry. Ugly sobbing that echoed through the empty shelter. "I'm sorry," I choked out. "I'm so sorry, Sheriff. I don't have enough. I don't have enough, and I don't know what to do." He didn't move, didn't acknowledge me. He'd already checked out, already made peace with dying. But I hadn't. The next morning, I woke up at 4 a.m. with a plan that was barely a plan at all. I grabbed my phone and started Googling every pit bull rescue within 100 miles. Sunshine State Bully Rescue, Second Chance Pit Bulls, Underdog Warriors. I called them all before my shift started, pacing my tiny apartment in the dark, practicing what I'd say. "Hi, I work at Clearview County Shelter, and we have a 4-year-old pit bull with severe Demodectic Mange who's scheduled for euthanasia in 3 days. He's the sweetest dog, completely treatable. He just needs time and medication and—" "We're at capacity," the first rescue said. "We've got 23 dogs in foster right now and a wait list of 40 more. I'm sorry." The second rescue didn't even let me finish. Mange cases are expensive, and most fosters won't take them because they look so scary. We can't help. The third, fourth, and fifth rescues all said the same thing. Full. No space. No funding. No fosters willing to take a medical case. Good luck. I called my landlord at 7 a.m. knowing he'd be awake because he was always awake, always fixing something in one of his 12 rental properties. His voice was rough with cigarettes and suspicion. "Bunny, rent's not due for another week. What do you want?" "Mr. Gerald, I know my lease says no pets, but I'm wondering if maybe we could work something out. Just temporarily, a few months maybe. I'd pay a pet deposit, "No pets means no pets," he cut me off. "I don't care if it's temporary. You bring an animal into that unit, you're out. I've got 3 people waiting for that apartment." "Mr. Gerald, please. This dog is going to die if I don't—" "Not my problem. You signed a lease. No pets." He hung up. I sat in my car outside the shelter for 10 minutes, trying not to scream. Then I went inside and found my supervisor, Rita, in her office doing payroll. She looked up when I knocked, her reading glasses sliding down her nose. "Bunny, you're early." "Rita, I need to ask you something." I stepped inside, closing the door behind me. "Is there any way, any possible way I could get an advance on my next paycheck? Just $200. I'll work extra shifts, I'll cover weekends, I'll do anything." Rita set down her pen and gave me that look, the one that said she already knew what this was about. "This is about the pit bull in isolation, isn't it, Sheriff? He's going to die tomorrow if I don't do something. I just need enough to cover the adoption fee and start his treatment. Rita, he's a good dog. He deserves a chance." She took off her glasses and rubbed her eyes. "Bunny, you know I can't do that. County policy. No paycheck advances, no exceptions. And even if I could, you can't afford a medical case. You're barely making rent as it is. What happens when you run out of money for his meds? What happens when your landlord finds out and evicts you? You'll be homeless with a sick dog." "So I should just let him die?" "I'm saying you need to be realistic. You can't save them all. God knows I wish you could, but you can't." I walked out of her office and went straight to Kennel 40. Sheriff was lying in the same corner, in the same position, like he hadn't moved in days. Maybe he hadn't. I sat down outside the chain link and put my head in my hands. I'd tried everything, called every rescue, begged my landlord, asked for money I knew I wouldn't get. I had nothing left. No options, no miracles. Tomorrow morning, they'd take him to the euthanasia room. Dr. Patel would inject the pink solution into his leg. His heart would stop. They'd bag his body and send it to the incinerator with the others. And I'd have to keep showing up for work. Keep cleaning kennels, keep pretending I was fine. Day 70 arrived with cruel sunshine. The kind of bright, beautiful morning that feels like an insult when your world is ending. I clocked in at 7 a.m., and the first thing I saw was the code red list stapled to the bulletin board. Sheriff's name was there in black ink. Sheriff, Kennel 40, Pit Bull Mix, 5 p.m., Dr. Patel, EU3. EU3, Euthanasia Room 3. I moved through my morning routine like a ghost. Fed the dogs in Building A, cleaned the kennels in Building B, walked the adoptables in the yard. Every task felt distant, like I was watching someone else do it. At 11:30 a.m., I finally made myself walk to the isolation wing. Sheriff was awake, barely. He lifted his head when I approached, and for the first time in weeks, his tail moved. Just once. A weak thump against the concrete that said, "I know you. You're the one who stayed." I unlocked his kennel and stepped inside. He didn't stand up, didn't have the energy. I knelt beside him on the floor and wrapped my arms around his skeletal body, feeling every rib, every vertebrae through his ravaged skin. He smelled like infection and medicated shampoo and suffering. I pressed my face into the one patch of clean fur on his shoulder and started crying. "I'm so sorry," I whispered into his coat. "I tried, Sheriff. I tried so hard. I called everyone. I begged. I don't have enough money. I don't have enough, and I'm so, so sorry." He turned his head, slow and deliberate, and licked my cheek. Once. Twice. His tongue was rough and dry, but gentle. So gentle. Like he was trying to comfort me even though he was the one dying. Like he was telling me it was okay, that he understood, that he didn't blame me. That's when something inside me snapped. I pulled back and looked at him. Really looked at him. This dog who'd been abandoned, chained, starved, and left to rot. This dog who spent 70 days in a concrete kennel watching people recoil in disgust. This dog who'd given up on living but still had enough heart left to lick away my tears. And I realized something so simple it nearly broke me. I couldn't live with myself if I let him die. I couldn't go home tonight knowing I'd chosen my security deposit over his life. I couldn't look at myself in the mirror tomorrow. Some things are worth losing everything for. I checked my watch. 4 p.m. I stood up, my legs shaking, and walked out of the kennel. I didn't go to the break room, didn't go to my locker. I walked straight to the administrative office where Rita and Director Kemp were reviewing intake forms. I didn't knock. I shoved the door open so hard it banged against the wall. Both of them looked up, startled. Director Kemp frowned. "Bunny, we're in the middle of—" "I'm adopting Sheriff," I said. My voice didn't sound like mine. It sounded feral, desperate. "Right now, I'm adopting him." Kemp set down his pen. "Bunny, we've been over this. You don't have the resources for a medical case. Rita told me you asked for a paycheck advance. The answer is no." "I'm not asking." I reached into my pocket and pulled out everything I had. The $42.50 from my savings jar, the $37 in tips I'd made last weekend covering an extra shift, the $20 bill I'd been saving for groceries. I threw it all on his desk. Crumpled bills, loose change, everything. "There's $99.50. I need to make a payment plan for the rest." Kemp stared at the pile of money like I dumped garbage on his desk. "That's not how this works. The adoption fee is $75 up front, non-negotiable. And that doesn't even cover his medical costs. You're looking at hundreds of dollars in treatment, medication, medicated baths, antibiotics, follow-up exams. You can't afford this." "Then I'll figure it out." "How?" He leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. "How are you going to figure it out, Bunny? You make $11.50 an hour. You walk to work. Rita tells me you eat ramen for lunch every single day. Where exactly are you going to get the money for a dog who needs intensive medical care?" "I'll work more shifts. I'll get a second job. I'll sell my car." "You need your car." "I'll sell my furniture. My voice cracked. I'll figure it out, okay? I'll figure it out because he deserves a chance, and I'm the only person in this entire building who sees that. Rita stood up, her voice gentle. Bunny, honey, your lease doesn't allow pets. Where are you even going to keep him? I don't care. Tears were streaming down my face now, hot and furious. I don't care if I get evicted. I don't care if I have to live in my car. I am not letting him die thinking nobody loved him. He's not trash. He's not a monster. He's just sick. He's just itchy. And if you don't let me adopt him right now, I swear to God I will never forgive myself, and I will never forgive either of you. The room went silent. Director Kemp looked at Rita. Rita looked at me. Then Kemp sighed, long and heavy, and picked up the pile of money. Fine, he said quietly. We'll do a payment plan. 75 today, 25 a month until you've covered the rest. But Bunny, if you can't keep up with his medical care, if he gets worse because you can't afford treatment, we're taking him back. Understood? I nodded so hard I felt dizzy. Understood. He pulled Sheriff's file and stamped it. Adopted. Then he handed me a leash. He's in EU3 prep. You've got 10 minutes before Dr. Patel starts the next appointment. I ran, sprinted down the hallway, my shoes squeaking on linoleum, my heart hammering so hard I thought it would burst. The prep room door was closed. I shoved it open. Dr. Patel was there, syringe in hand, the pink solution already drawn. Sheriff was on the table, lying on his side, too weak to sit up. He wasn't even looking at her. He was staring at the wall, waiting for it to be over. "Stop!" I gasped. "Stop! I'm adopting him right now!" I held up the leash. "He's mine." She set down the syringe slowly, carefully, like she didn't quite believe what she was hearing. Then she smiled, this small, sad smile that said she'd seen too many dogs die and not enough people fight. "Okay," she said softly. "Okay, he's all yours." Getting Sheriff to my car was the hardest 50 feet I'd ever walked. He could barely stand. I had to half carry him, his weight pressing against my side, his legs trembling with every step. People stared. A family waiting in the lobby pulled their kids closer, whispering. I didn't care. I got him to my beat-up Honda, opened the back door, and lifted all 70 pounds of him onto the seat. He collapsed immediately, panting, his swollen eyes half closed. I drove home going 15 miles under the speed limit, terrified every bump would hurt him. When I pulled up to my apartment building, I sat in the car for 5 minutes, staring at the front door, knowing the second I carried Sheriff inside, I was violating my lease, knowing Mr. Gerald could evict me, knowing I might end up homeless. Then I looked at Sheriff in the rearview mirror. He was watching me with those swollen, crusty eyes, waiting to see what happened next, trusting me even though trust had only ever hurt him before. I carried him inside. My studio apartment had never felt smaller. I set Sheriff down on the floor, and he stood there swaying, looking around at the space that was barely big enough for one person, let alone a 70-pound dog. Then he walked 3 steps to my mattress, climbed onto it with great effort, and collapsed. Within seconds, he was asleep. I sat on the floor and called Dr. Patel. "I need to know exactly what to do," I said. "Everything, step by step." She walked me through it. Brevecto for the mites, 1 dose, $80, would start killing the Demodex within days. Cephalexin antibiotics for the skin infection, 30 pills, $60. Medicated baths twice a week using benzoyl peroxide shampoo, $12 a bottle. Follow-up exam in 2 weeks, $50. I did the math in my head, $202. I had $9 left after the adoption fee. "I'll make it work," I told her. "Bunny," her voice was serious, "this is going to get worse before it gets better. The medication will start killing the mites, but as they die, his skin might get more inflamed. He's going to itch like crazy. The scabs have to fall off before new fur can grow. It's going to be months of work. Are you sure?" I looked at Sheriff, asleep on my mattress, his ribs rising and falling with each labored breath. I'm sure. The first week was hell. I picked up every extra shift the shelter offered. I ate one meal a day, usually just rice and whatever vegetables were on sale. I stopped buying coffee, stopped going anywhere that cost money. Every single dollar went to Sheriff. I bought Brevecto first, watching $80 disappear from my account. Then the antibiotics, then the shampoo. The first medicated bath happened in my tiny bathroom, with Sheriff standing in the tub, shaking while I lathered him with shampoo that smelled like chemicals and hope. The water ran brown with dirt and dead skin. I cried the whole time, whispering apologies every time he flinched, every time the soap touched a raw spot. But after 2 weeks, something changed. The scabs started loosening. The swelling around his eyes went down enough that I could finally see their color, deep amber, warm and kind. His oozing stopped. His appetite came back. He started standing at the door waiting for walks. Started wagging his tail when I came home from work. After a month, tiny patches of fur appeared. Soft, downy, blue-gray fuzz on his shoulders, down his back. The white patch on his chest emerged clean and bright. His skin, once raw and angry, started healing into smooth pink that would eventually fade. After 3 months, he was unrecognizable. The monster was gone. In his place was a beautiful, muscular pit bull with a shining blue-gray coat, floppy ears, and eyes that looked at me like I'd hung the moon. He'd gained back the weight. His skin was perfect. People stopped me on walks now, asking if they could pet him, saying how gorgeous he was. 6 months after I brought him home, I came back from work to find Sheriff asleep on the rug. I'd finally saved up enough to buy him a soft, thick thing from the discount store that he'd claimed as his own. He was lying on his back, all 4 paws in the air, snoring. The apartment was still tiny. I was still broke, but we were home. Here's what I need you to understand. Sheriff looked like a monster, but that monster was created by neglect, not nature. Demodectic mange, the condition that made people cover their children's eyes, that made them call him a zombie, that nearly got him killed, is caused by microscopic mites that live on every dog. When a dog's immune system crashes from stress or malnutrition, those mites overpopulate and destroy the skin. It looks horrifying. It looks contagious. It looks hopeless. But it's not. Modern medications like Brevecto or NexGard kill the mites within weeks. Medicated baths with benzoyl peroxide flush out infected hair follicles. Antibiotics clear up secondary infections. In a few months, that monster becomes a healthy, beautiful dog. The transformation isn't magic. It's just medicine, time, and someone willing to see past the scabs. If you ever walk into a shelter and see a dog with mange, don't turn away. Don't cover your kid's eyes. Don't whisper about putting it out of its misery. Ask questions. Learn what's really wrong. Give that dog the chance that dozens of people denied Sheriff. Because underneath the sickness is a soul that's been waiting, sometimes for months, for someone to see their worth. Never judge a shelter dog by their skin condition alone. The sickest-looking dog in the building might be the most loyal, loving companion you'll ever have. They just need someone brave enough to look past the surface. Sheriff taught me that, and now, every single day, he thanks me for it by simply existing. Healthy, happy, and sleeping on a rug in an apartment we barely fit in together. That's more than enough for both of us. If the Sheriff's journey touched your heart, don't let it end with a like. Hit subscribe and join Heartbound Canine Tales. Be the voice for the dogs that the world has written off. Because every dog, no matter how sick or ugly, deserves a second chance to be loved. Thank you.